Hi, everybody. My name is Neil Thompson. I'm the founder of Teach the Geek. It's an online platform for science and engineering professionals. The first offering of the platform is a public speaking course called Teach the Geek to Speak. To learn more about it, you can go to teachthegeek.com. Again, that's teachthegeek.com. Today, my guest is Tamara Baynham. She is a biomedical engineer major who now actually she worked in clinical research for a number of companies, but founded her own consultancy. And I'm actually looking forward to speaking to her more about her interest in clinical research, her motivation for starting her consultancy, and any future plans. Welcome to Teach the Geek Interviews, Tamara.
Thank you. Thanks for inviting me.
You're very welcome. First question. Where did your interest in biomedical engineering come from?
Well, as a young person in the South, you basically, when you're good in school, people think, okay, you can be a doctor or a lawyer. So that was kind of the two spots for me. But my high school teacher, introduced me to engineering and had me to go to a summer engineering program. And so the summer engineering program was at Tennessee Tech. And what I found out was that there was this wonderful thing called biomedical engineering, and I got so excited and I got hooked. So that's how I was turned on to biomedical engineering.
I know a lot of people that initially when they find out about biomedical engineering, it's actually from having an interest in becoming a doctor at some point. Did you still have that interest even after finding out about biomedical engineering, or did you just think, okay, I'm just going to stick with biomedical engineering?
What happened was when I got into my undergraduate studies at Vanderbilt, I had a very interesting environment in that we actually had 2 Black male professors in biomedical engineering. And that, as you might have guessed, is pretty rare to have any Black faculty in engineering, but the fact that we had 2 Black males as faculty really piqued my interest, and it actually led me to see biomedical engineering as well as a PhD in biomedical engineering as an option that I didn't even know existed. So that environment really helped me to hone in my interest in biomedical engineering.
Interesting. So you mentioned a PhD, and from the research that I did on you, I saw that you ended up getting a PhD. Was it from having those 2 Black male professors at Vanderbilt that gave you the idea to get a PhD, or was it any other reason?
That was the primary reason, yeah.
Okay. And then I guess even, you see these 2 Black professors and they have PhDs, that's great and all. And now you have the idea that it's something that you can do, but ultimately you still have to go through the entire program. I mean, what was the motivation to keep going and to finish off the PhD?
Well, I was very motivated because I had several family members who had passed away from cardiac issues. So I was focused on that problem. And as I had a double major in biomedical engineering and electrical engineering. So I used that to kind of hone my skills into focusing on how I could work on treating cardiac issues. So my research work was focused on defibrillation mechanisms. And one of the things that really kept me focused and going is when I was at University of Alabama at Birmingham for my PhD, and the program at UAB had done a significant job in gathering Black PhD students at UAB and providing us with an environment that was conducive to actual success. So I think it was that drive to work on a problem that was interesting, as well as that environment that they created at UAB, where you had this really strong network of other PhD students, a graduate, Wanda Jordan at the graduate school, who kind of kept us together. And there was really that environment and the problem.
Okay. And you said that you did your undergrad at Vanderbilt, but then you did your PhD at UAB. Is there a reason you decided to change schools?
I did actually apply and got in at Vanderbilt, but I felt like I needed to I'm from the Nashville area, and I felt like I needed to move. So I did interview and get in at several other schools. And the way I chose schools was that I went and I spoke with the students at the different schools. And the students were really happy at UAB. So that was really what made my ultimate decision. And I really, I also was focused on the problem, but the school that had the lab that I wanted to work in didn't give me admission. So I wanted to go to Duke and work in this cardiac electrophysiology lab. I didn't get in. And in hindsight, I might not have gotten in because I wrote specifically that I wanted to work in that lab, and that lab actually moved. And that lab moved to UAB. And I didn't know, so I ended up working in the lab that I wanted to work in, serendipitously. It moved to UAB, so that's the lab I ended up working in. But when I was writing my application, I was really focused on that lab. So I didn't get into Duke, but then that lab moved from Duke to UAB. So I did still get to do the work that I wanted to do. Wonderful. So that was interesting.
Well, it's great that everything worked out in the end. You know, from what I understand, a lot of people, when they decide to go down the PhD route, it's so when they're done, they could stay in academia and become professors. Was that your idea, or did you always plan on leaving academia when you were done your PhD?
You know, that was my initial idea, but our lab was very, is non-traditional in that we actually had scientists from 2 different medical device companies that were co-located with us and doing applied research. So our lab was primarily a applied research lab. So we had scientists from Guidant, which eventually became Boston Scientific Cardiac Rhythm Management, and we had Physio Control, which I guess eventually was purchased by Medtronic, which was an external defibrillator. So Guidant had an internal defibrillator company, and Medtronic was the external defibrillator. So we had that applied research anyway at our lab, and most of the graduate students in our lab went to work in industry. So I kind of had an experience that was different than most PhDs do.
Yeah, it definitely sounds like it. So I mentioned in the intro that you eventually ended up working in clinical research. Is that something that you had always planned on doing? I know you'd said that initially you planned on staying in academia, but then a lot of the people that you worked with in your lab and into industry, was going into industry, specifically clinical research, the plan?
Well, clinical research came by, after the fact. So basically, my career in industry started in upfront innovation group, where we actually would come up with ideas, do animal research, IP development, and first in human clinical trials. So as a scientist, you would go from the idea on the napkin to the first in human clinical trial. So along the way, I picked up the beginnings of patenting as well as clinical research. And as I moved throughout my career, I continued to gain experience in both of those. And one of the things that I knew that I eventually might have to do, because I have a 2-career family, my husband's a PhD in marketing and I have a PhD. So it's always going to be kind of difficult for the 2 of us to kind of to manage our careers. So I had it in the back of my mind that I needed to gain skills that I could translate into an independent business that could be moved. So I gained clinical research skills, and because I enjoyed inventing, I had my company pay for me to go to patent bar courses, and I took the patent bar, and I'm a registered patent agent as well. So I was able to kind of take those pieces that you could pull out and move forward with those. So it was a conscious decision for me to gain those experiences. Absolutely.
That's pretty smart, trying to get the skills that the companies need, so that no matter where you are and no matter what kind of virus is out here, there's companies that need those skills, they'll find you, and you always can find work that way. That was smart on your part. You had that foresight.
Absolutely. And I tell people all the time, when they're starting their careers, they have to think like that, because you never know where things are going to take you. So you need to always continuously be learning and growing as you go throughout your career, and take advantage of those professional development opportunities that come your way when you're working.
Absolutely. So another thing that I've always thought about when it comes to PhDs, specifically to ones in STEM like yourself, is when they come out and they try to get jobs in industry, they tend to be pigeonholed into more product development R&D jobs, and not necessarily other aspects of industry. I can think of I worked in medical devices as a product development engineer, and that's kind of where I was naturally steered. It wasn't really to anything else like sales or marketing or quality regulatory affairs, any of those things. It's like right into R&D or product development. Did you have that experience too, or did you feel like there weren't any kind of fields that were off limits to you when you came out of school?
That's kind of the way it is. That's kind of the way it works, especially with a PhD. They kind of put you in the research area. But what I've seen over the years is the way to kind of move out of those roles is people will take advantage of MBA programs once they get into companies, and the company will pay for them to go get their MBAs, and then they can go move into marketing or sales or whatever other thing that they might want to do. And also in terms of specifically at J&J, I saw a lot of engineers become patent agents and then become patent liaisons. So there are, you can use those, you can get into the company, but the way that you move is to kind of try to, get assignments in other areas, use the professional development to get further training or get an MBA. And that's how people kind of move. But the first thing is to kind of get in there first.
Yeah, you're right. Absolutely. Just get in there, and then once you're in there, then you can make movements after that. So you have a consultancy, and it's called Ingenuity Medical Device Research. What services does the consultancy provide?
So I provide companies with clinical research support, of course, as well as I'm a patent agent, so I provide companies with patent drafting and helping. And I kind of focus on people who are scientists or physicians to help them bring their ideas and translate those into the patents. And the other things that I have worked on is medical writing, so I can help folks who kind of, in that sense, I'm like a scientist on loan, so I can kind of help folks put together their journal articles or posters or presentations for meetings.
Okay, yeah, those are great services to offer. And now that I think about it, we right now we're dealing with, around the world, this coronavirus, and people are having to work from home. I know that there are certain companies that their preference is to have people on site, and there are other companies that are okay with people being remote. So now, because you're someone who works remotely, do you find it difficult to work with or to get companies that prefer on-site, even before this whole coronavirus thing happened, on board with having somebody like yourself working remotely as opposed to having someone that's in the office?
The nature of clinical research is remote. So most of the time you're at the sites. So that's not a job that's kind of in-house. So I would suspect that folks who are used to like the R&D functions where you need to be in a lab space or something like that, that's probably where the difficulty comes. But like the clinical research and even IP, for instance, a lot of times companies outsource that to other firms or to consultants. So the things that I do are kind of outside of having to be in an office setting anyway.
Yeah, that works. So the next question I have has to do with public speaking. I like to talk about it because just based on my own struggle, the whole goal from this channel, or the motivation from this channel, was based on my own struggles in public speaking when I worked as an engineer, having to give presentations in front of management. And I saw that I wasn't the only person that struggled with it. So I'm always keen on speaking with people that are like myself, that come from STEM backgrounds, but that embrace public speaking, and in fact, flourished because of it. Has public speaking always been something that's come easy to you? And if not, what have you done to get better at it?
Just like you said, when I first got into my first job at Guidance, what I would see is it wasn't the people who had the best knowledge or the best ideas, but it was the people who were able to deliver a message. Those are the people who were continuously being promoted.
Right.
So I saw, I've got to do something about this. So, so the first thing that I did, I did some Toastmaster things, and I also, anytime people would ask me to be on a panel or go to a career day, I would always volunteer to do that so that I could get more comfortable with speaking to folks. That I think is the single most thing, especially inside of a company, that you can do for yourself to increase your ability to be promoted, is to be able to speak well and confidently.
Absolutely. What topics do you like to speak on?
So I speak a lot about how to navigate spaces as a woman, as a Black woman. And, as a biomedical engineer, I've been able to, I'm usually the only Black person in the room. A lot of times I'm the only woman in the room. So just kind of talking about how to navigate those spaces successfully. And I also talk to a lot of young kids about opportunities in STEM. So it's kind of a young kids opportunity in STEM. And then I always talk to a lot of people in graduate school, postdocs, people entering the medical device workforce. That's the other kind of audience that I usually speak with.
When it comes to navigating these environments as a Black woman, what would your number one tip be?
I think my number one tip would be to build a support network. And what I mean by that, once you get into a space, you need to find out who kind of your team is. And your team should not always look the way that you look. I can say in my career, my most fervent advocates have been white men throughout my career. So, I mean, don't be afraid to get to know people that don't look like you, because you can't always rely on people of your own race or sex to be your advocate.
You know what? I wholeheartedly agree with what you just said, Tamara. And I think, unless I mistook what you said you typically either are the only Black person, the only woman in your spaces. So if you're looking for people like you, you're not going to find them.
Exactly. So absolutely. So you have to be open to getting out of your comfort zone and pursuing support where support is, where people are willing to get it.
Absolutely, yeah, and that can come in any shape or size, any kind of packaging. It's funny you mentioned this, because I know this woman, and she's maybe a little older than I am, and she's a Black woman, and we go to events every now and then here. I live in the San Diego area, and if you know San Diego, the Black population here isn't all that great. Maybe 6% at most.
At most, yeah.
So any of the events that we go to, I mean, typically we're some of the few Black people that are there, especially if you're in the tech space down here. And she'd once said that she, oftentimes because of that, she gets uncomfortable and then leaves the events. But I remember, I never said this to her, but I was definitely thinking it in my head. Like, if you get uncomfortable every time you go somewhere as a Black person, especially here in San Diego, you're going to spend a whole lot of time being uncomfortable and not going to events.
Absolutely.
So you definitely, I mean, it's in your best interest to become more comfortable speaking to other people, because other people are willing to help. You just have to ask sometimes.
Absolutely.
Yeah. So when it comes to public speaking and then giving presentations, do you have a process for that, and for preparing your presentations? And if so, what is it?
So my main process is to write down what my message is and get comfortable with it. So if I'm going to be delivering something, I will practice. I will go over it at least 10 times. And then when I go to the event, I do not bring note cards and stuff like this. I've had a really bad experience once when I had all these note cards and I dropped them and I'm like, oh my God, what am I gonna do now? So the main thing is to be over prepared when you go. And then just to speak to, you might have some points that you put down and just speak to them, but don't try to read and don't try to memorize, but just speak to those points and be prepared. That's the main thing, be prepared, over prepared.
I'm a firm believer in preparation, Tamara. And I actually, who knows, maybe it's because we're engineers, because I get made fun of this for this. I get made fun of for this. So I have a friend, and he's not an engineer, and he's another guy that we go to these tech events, and he holds events himself. And you typically, when it comes to the events that he holds, he'll speak at the beginning of them just to introduce the person that's actually going to be presenting. And he never prepares, ever. He always goes off the cuff. And you know what? It's obvious that he goes off the cuff. Because it kind of there's no flow really, and like from the beginning into the end. I'm a big believer in making sure that things are easy to follow and that there's a clear beginning, middle, and end. Because if not, then people might not want to listen. And I think it's also a courtesy to the audience to be prepared too, because it shows that you put effort into the presentation and you're not wasting their time with what you're saying. Whatever you're saying, it's meant to be said, not just I'm saying stuff just to say it.
Absolutely. Absolutely.
And you make fun of me because I'm always like, I want to be prepared when it comes to presentations. I practice them. You mentioned the points. So I don't write down anything. I mean, I don't write down what I'm going to say word for word. I believe what you said about that too. But in terms of preparing, in terms of making sure that I hit the points that I want to in the order I want to hit them, I definitely prepare that.
Absolutely.
Yeah. Do you ever get nervous when it comes to public speaking? And if so, how do you deal with your nerves?
Every time. I do get nervous, but how I deal with it is, just understanding that that everybody gets nervous. It's not something that's something that I only do. Everybody gets nervous when they're doing something. So I just remind myself that I'm not the only person that gets nervous, and that people are there to hear what you're going to say. They're not there to point out anything that you might do wrong. So people are really there to be your advocate. They're there to hear you, and they want to hear you. So they're on your side. If they weren't on your side, they wouldn't be in the audience. So I try to make sure that I always understand that I'm going to be nervous, but that should not keep me from providing the information that the people came there to hear.
Yeah, I firmly believe that. Nerves are normal. And in my opinion, if you're not nervous, it's a sign that you don't care about what you're talking about.
Absolutely.
I mean, if you really wanted to get across the information you wanted to get across, you probably are going to be nervous because you want to make sure that actually happens. And if you don't, if you don't really care, you probably just get up there and say whatever and just get off the stage, I guess.
And I think that's probably another thing that happens to engineers is we're perfectionists by nature. So we want to make sure that everything is the way that we set it out to be. And I think one of the things that I also try to tell myself is that I need to quit trying to make everything be perfect. Everything is not going to be perfect. So that's another thing that speakers need to keep in mind, that perfectionism is something that you just are never going to have. So just understand that you doesn't have to be perfect to be good and be something that's valuable to other people to hear.
Yeah, I'm a firm believer in practice makes progress, not practice makes perfect.
Exactly. I like that. I'm going to use that. Practice makes progress. I like that.
Yeah. So if you use it, you got to give me my credit, though.
I will.
The copyright.
Teach the geek.
So, earlier you mentioned some really great tips when it comes to public speaking. Obviously, be prepared. Try to ditch the note cards because if you drop them, then you're really screwed. start speaking to your points, and then, making sure that your presentation has a message. Are there any other tips that you think are important when it comes to someone who wants to become more effective in public speaking?
Fun. I mean, have fun. Don't be so serious about it. It's not life or death. So have fun with it.
Yeah, absolutely. Is there anything else that you'd like to add that, in terms of things that you're currently working on?
Right now, I'm currently working on several different projects, but I'm working on a startup with a MD, PhD friend of mine that I think is a medical device project that I think is going to be pretty interesting in the coming years. So stay tuned.
Okay, wonderful. So how can people get in touch with you, Tamara?
So they can go to my website, ingenuitymedicaldeviceresearch.com, or they can go to my personal website, tamarabaynhamphd.com.
Wonderful. Well, this marks the end of another episode of Teach the Geek interviews. My name is Neil Thompson. I'm the founder of Teach the Geek. It's an online platform for science and engineering professionals. The first offering of the platform is a public speaking course called Teach the Geek to Speak. To learn more about that, you can go to teachthegeek.com. Again, that's teachthegeek.com. Until next time, take care and stay safe. Thanks, Tamara.
Thank you.